Today, I'm joined by Professor Greg Haff, one of the leading voices in strength and conditioning. But instead of talking about programming or training loads, today we are diving into artificial intelligence. We're going to cover a lot of different questions on the topic, but in particular, we'll focus on one of the most important aspects to using AI effectively, and that is prompt engineering. So we're going to dig into how crafting the right prompt can transform the quality of AI outputs, and also look at how this skill set is going to reshape research, practice, and education in the years to come. So, Greg, you're widely known for your contributions to strength and conditioning research. So then what actually drew you into the world of AI and prompt engineering?
So for me, a lot of people don't really know this. I actually started out in computer science and switched over to sports science and strength and conditioning. So I've always had this kind of dual interest of, the physical stuff of being a coach and strength training in the science of sport. But I also, in the background, I've always done coding and programming. Even in my lab for some of the analyses we do, I write my own stuff. Where I got into AI was at ECU, where I currently am employed. We are really trying to lead the nation in Australia on education and embedding AI into our educational systems. And so they had some mandatory personal development classes that we had to take. And I went to one, and I was the only one from my division that actually went. And I found it really fascinating. And I kind of do what I always do when I get interested in something. I start to go into a deep dive. And I started to look at the work that Ethan Molnick is doing at the Wharton School of Business. And he's considered one of the AI thought leaders in education. And that took me into this idea of how we could leverage AI not only in the educational space, but then also it got me thinking about where is this going to go in the world of strength and conditioning and in sports science more broadly. So it started from our education initiatives at our university, but I think I've gone farther than where they have because of my natural curiosity about computers, science, and performance.
And I think that it kind of explains how you and I got talking about it as well, because obviously I've done a bit of content around AI, and we've just shared emails back and forth about papers or ideas or things we've come across. And then that led to this idea around, well, shall we maybe share some of these ideas with a broader audience? So for those who are maybe watching, who are maybe earlier on in their kind of foray into AI, how would you then describe prompt engineering with that definition in mind? Why does it matter?
If we look at generative AI, right? So most people tend to use it like Google. They just ask a question, but that lacks a lot of context and a lot of real structure to kind of make it work well. So if you think about prompt engineering, it's a practice of crafting instructions. So it's almost like programming with instructions. And the best analogy that I can give is that it's like coaching, right? If I am coaching an athlete, I have to give them good contextual communication to get them to do something or to learn a skill. And really prompt engineering is taking this tool, which is a large language model, and giving it instructions to help it become more precise. The better my instructions are, the more precise its responses will be. It's almost like, in another way of looking at it, is how I would work with a young graduate student. The communication I have to give a first-year doctoral student is much more precise, more prescriptive. And as he or she becomes better, then I don't have to be as instructive. But with generative AI, it's kind of, for lack of a better word, kind of dumb. It needs to be really told what to do. And so prompt engineering is a way to do this. And it's really just communication.
And I think that distinction from Google is really important for people to develop their skill set in AI, right? Because we are so used to just asking a question or seeking a particular topic. But the point of generative AI is that it can create this answer, it can create insights. And so we need to use maybe more of this conversational approach, more of this layering engineering approach to get better answers.
Yeah, I would totally agree with that. And that kind of really links to Google has really great materials on how to actually prompt in some of their learning activities. And one of the things they talk about is thoughtful, create really excellent inputs. And I really like that. because really what that means is we're trying to give it a task, give it context, give it references, then we need to evaluate, it's going to evaluate it, and then we have to iterate it. So we're really, it's kind of this process of kind of giving it good information, instructions, giving it context so it knows what it's doing. And then we as the experts have to kind of look at what it's giving us, because if our instructions are poor, it's going to give us poor quality outputs. And it's going to confidently give us poor quality outputs, because AI is really confident in what it gives you. So that human part of having mastery in whatever field you're in becomes critical, I think.
Can you just repeat those points again?
Yeah. Thoughtfully create really excellent inputs. And that really translates to task, context, references, evaluate, iterate. I think where people really mess up, they don't iterate. They just take whatever the AI gives them at face value. And I see that with a lot of assignments that come in from students that are not using AI ethically, because I think we're going to have to move to a point where people have to learn how to use it ethically. We're not going to stop people from using it. We could lock down everything, but people are going to use it. So we've got to teach them how to use it, and using these kind of prompt engineering skills, I think, are going to help us educate the future sports scientists how to use it correctly.
Yeah. And I know when we were sharing ideas for this conversation, you brought up the importance of ethical AI, both from a practitioner perspective, but obviously as well from an educational perspective. I agree that it can't be as simple as just a blanket ban. And it shouldn't be, because I think, as we were talking about before we started recording, for me, it's close to an everyday thing now. And I think it's just going to get bigger. And so we have to really be intentional about developing students to use it, but then how we integrate the ethics into education. Now, I know that's a big topic and doesn't have a simple answer, but what's your take on how we might approach that?
Well, I think we have to create learning activities in education. I think that's where it's got to start. And one of the things that what I'm trying to do with my teaching is giving the students activities where they're allowed to use AI, but then they have to iterate what the AI gives them to evaluate what AI is giving them. One of the best examples I can give is we could have them have AI design a resistance training program, but then they can go and benchmark that resistance training program against, for example, UKSCA, NSCA, ASCA, the major organizations say is good programming. And we often find that AI will hit some of the points, but it will leverage the learning material that it's been trained on, which is generally going to be the internet, which is going to be all kinds of sources that aren't peer reviewed and aren't often considered standard. So that training program will have some elements that are really good, but the student needs to figure out how to use it. But I also think it's about creating kind of educational material that teaches them about things like data privacy, getting away from black box thinking. And one of the ones that I have been reading about lately is called desk killing, where the students basically can't problem solve anymore because the AI does all the problem solving. And so not just having the AI do the work, but having the knowledge to use AI to do the manual, tedious work, but not replace learning. And I think we're seeing a lot of material coming out in the learning spaces where students, a portion of them are just having AI do the hard yards that we would have done as students to learn content. And that desk killing is going to be problematic, because think of it like, let's say we all have GPSs on our phones now, and it's always funny to watch people use their GPS to navigate around cities. I remember a time when we had to be able to use a map, read a map, figure it out, determine where you need to go. And oftentimes when people's GPSs don't work, they can't figure out where to go. So for me, I look at AI in the same way. If we become so over-reliant on the AI, but don't understand how the AI is getting to its destination or its information, that becomes problematic. But that's where prompt engineering can come in, because I can actually prompt the AI to explain how it made its conclusion. And I read a recent report that Claude from Anthropic is really, really good at explaining its process. if you prompt it in your prompt. So, you could say, tell me what a periodized training program is, design it for, a certain type of athlete, explain how you got to this, to your output. And that's a very rough way of doing it. I'd do it much more specific in a prompt engineering way. But that kind of gives the person knowledge about how it's getting to where it needs to be. And so we're still learning the process. So getting away from that Google perspective.
Just listening to you talk on that already, I'm thinking, wow, I could definitely do a better job of that myself. I think we assume it is this kind of black box and don't even think at times to ask it how it came to that conclusion. So even something like that is like a really simple additional step that I could take, lots of people could take to get under the hood a little bit more.
From a learning perspective, I think in the education setting, that's going to be a critical part of ethical AI instruction, because then the student can look at, okay, how did it get to it? And maybe they can dissect where it went wrong, potentially. And I think that'll be kind of an interesting thing. I also think a problem that we could get into is that there could be a homogenizing of thought. If everybody uses AI to answer the questions all the time, we don't get diverse thinkers. And what do we know about forward progress is people thinking outside the box and not being in the norm. And that kind of groupthink kind of mentality can cause problems. But we want people that are outliers, that question things and don't just go with the norm. Not only because we want to challenge what we know, but it could be something that changes, how we do things. If we look at, how the high jump, Flowsbury flop, before he did that, everybody did it a different way. And that changed the sport. And so I get fearful with that with AI. And then the last one is and this is something I've struggled with probably for the last decade or so. I feel as if we in sport are trying to over technology implement in sport, and we're getting away from that coach athlete relationship where the athlete and the coach aren't connecting because the algorithms are doing all the work in the background. And there's a lot of risk with that, especially a lot of people have an app for training and it tells me what to do, but there's no coach really involved. And so I think there could be risk of that. But what I think we could think about AI to mitigate that is use AI to free up time so I have more time to build those athlete relationships by getting rid of those meaningless tasks. And I think that's going to be kind of important as well.
I'm glad that you touched on there some of like the limitations, because people are cautious around AI and often the discussion is just good or bad, right? It's just reductionist and it's just we should or shouldn't use it. And I think that you're highlighting, okay, well, this could be a limitation from it, but is this a solution to then how we actually use it and implement it and find the beneficial way as opposed to the negative way?
I think people are afraid. I know when I first started with it, I was like, oh, AI bad. We don't want to use it at all. And then I started to think about it more as a scientist. And actually, really, AI is just about asking good questions and then trying to find good answers. You think about it. And so I started to think, okay, where can AI benefit me? And I'm like you, I probably spend more money on AI plans than I probably should, because I find each one has different strengths and weaknesses. And so every day I engage with some form of AI in some way, either for brainstorming or for taking some task that is difficult and making it more time efficient. But I have to be ethical about it because I can't put like athlete data and names into there, because if we do that, it could be exposed unless we have an enterprise account. So if we have an enterprise account, we can put constraints into it where that information is not shared. So if I'm working with a sporting club, I'd want to have an enterprise account for AI where it's internally it's contained. And that could mitigate some of those issues with having things going out into the world, which are problematic. And so as I began to work with AI, I started to realize, okay, it's really good for this. Probably don't like it for this. One place I found it really useful for is a lot of times doctoral students struggle to write reviews of literature for their thesis. They just can't figure out the flow. So I'll often say, all right,
Mm.
here's our topics, and I will brainstorm with them with an AI to get to a point where we get an actual outline of the things they need to actually write their review of literature. So it's almost like having a really great thinking friend or another classmate that I can bounce ideas off of. And it can help me. But I still have to iterate it and I still have to question it. But if I think about it, when I was a grad student, my classmates and I got into many bantering debates on things. So it's just a digital workmate in a way.
I completely agree. It is like an assistant in a way. And I think one of the things you said earlier as well about the danger of everything becoming the same, with homogenous thinking and outputs is a really important discussion. But again, if we lead with our inputs and our philosophies and our thoughts, and then use the tool for feedback and iteration, like you're saying, that's how it should be used, because your thinking is still at the core of your work. You know, I do use AI with a lot of my writing, a lot of what I do, but I never want it to just generate something from scratch. It has to start with something from me inside, but then I can use it as that tool, like you say, that assistant, whether it's particularly for, literature reviews is super helpful. All those kinds of tasks where it's just giving you that feedback, it becomes like you say, in that case, a peer, another student, or potentially like a tutor.
Some of the really cool things you can do, like if you can use your prompt engineering skills to make like an agent or a gem or whatever, whichever the AIs call it, and you can actually create kind of a prompt engineered kind of way of thinking where it can be used to beta test things. Like I could give it a training program and it could ask me questions about it, like evaluate it and then make me think. And so I think those are all good ethical kind of ways of using AI. I think where we get into trouble is going to be when, and this seems to be happening in a percentage of students, they're not learning the foundational knowledge in their discipline, and they're relying on the AI to give them the foundational knowledge. And I think that's where it gets problematic because, for example, you said like literature review. I get really kind of hesitant with literature searching with AI, and there's a couple reasons why. I find often, one, if it's a strength and conditioning paper, 99.9% of the time, if it's a wrong reference, Paul Comfort referenced. It's actually hilarious. So we really got to check those references and go search that they actually exist. In academia, the fastest way to figure out if someone used AI is look at their reference list. And, I've had many students turn in papers that I supposedly wrote. I did not.
Yeah.
And so I think that's problematic. Now, there are some newer ones that I know you've showcased on some of your YouTube posts that seem a little bit better, but even from a reviewing of manuscripts with AI, what we're finding is that the AI lacks the ability to nuance things like research design, statistical methods appropriateness. Like it knows what the statistics are, but is it appropriate for that data set? Now, do I think that'll get better? Yes. So what I'm training my doctoral students is, if you want to use it to search things, but we've got to double check it. Like, for example, you could create an agent to do weekly literature pulls from Google Scholar, PubMed, Scopus, and collate topics for you. So you could create a prompt to do that. Now that's really ethical and that works really well. Now, I realize there's like SciSpace and stuff like that. That's kind of doing that. And there's another one that you posted about from England, which I'm drawing a blank on, but that was for sports science. And so,
sports science AI.
And so I think the biggest challenge there, I think, is just that iteration step. I think if I'm going to hit that, I'm going to probably say that a million times in our conversation, because the iteration step is the quality control step. And the way I look at AI and prompt engineering is that the first go is never correct. So when I'm designing a research project and we're doing a study, first thing we have to do is have a really good question. Then we do a pilot project. Then we iterate what we find with the pilot project before we actually do our actual project. So that's kind of AI. I've got to have some good question that I'm going to frame. I test it out with AI, I iterate it, and then I move forward. I might iterate it several times. And one of the things that I learned from the Google course that I took was that once you get a good prompt, you should save it in a prompt index, it's a spreadsheet basically. And you can basically have the prompt that you use and you can, what it's used for. And I can send you the spreadsheet if you want. It's pretty interesting. And by doing that, if your prompt is good, every time you use it, you should get similar responses. And I found that with some of the activities that I've been doing in the teaching space lately, I've gotten my prompts are getting more dialed in and they're getting more consistent responses. And you can actually create a prompt to create, if you do it in an agent way, that it can make a standardized output format. So it's the same output every time, but different information. And so that's where I think you can manage work. So like, let's say I'm now the sports scientist for a professional football team. Well, one of the hardest things I know from talking to people in that space and the times that I've worked in college football is getting reports to the coaches for 100 athletes, right? Mm-hmm. That's super time consuming. So if I can create this agent structure that can get a report on all and bring all that data into one place, create a standardized report, but I can have 3 or 4 different standardized reports, one for the head coach, one for the athletic trainer, one for the nutritionist. All that stuff could come from the same data set, but your prompts would create a different output based on the same data, basically changing the language to allow it to align with each group. And so that'd be like really advanced prompting skills. And that would take some time, but once you had it down, man, the time saving that you would have to do the things that you want to do, not the paperwork that you don't like.
So when you're talking about an AI agent then, is that something you can do in any of the platforms? Say ChatGPT, obviously the most popular, most commonly used. Is that something you need a special software for, or is it just the way that you teach and train your login, if you like, on ChatGPT?
So the 2 ones that I've played the most with are the GPTs in ChatGPT, but I have a pro structure. I picked the pro one. That one is really good because they've done a really nice job. You don't have to have really great prompt engineering skills because you can make the prompts. And then you can edit those prompts if you want. And it does it kind of in basically a one-shot kind of structured, like a checklist almost. And you can do that. So an example, what I do right now in my courses. So when I give students feedback, I have a GPT that I've created that gives them an individualized learning plan based on the feedback I give them. So I'm not breaking any rules because it's my work, which is my response to their work. And then it creates a learning plan based on the feedback that I give them. And that saves me an inordinate amount of time because they don't have any questions about what they need to do to improve, which is good education. So GPT is really good. And I really highly suggest people play with it. Because it can really help you. Now, there's a course on Coursera from Vanderbilt on how to create agents, which looks pretty good. There's some free things on the Anthropic Academy has some wonderful free resources on how to prompt engineer, how to create agents, because it also has agent capacity as well. And then the gems on Gemini are really good as well. All 3 of them have some way to create agents. Now, Gemini is really good because it can be integrated into the whole Google workspace, and you could create agents to do things like, emails and all kinds of things. I haven't really gotten into that much. I've played mostly ChatGPT because it seems to be moving quickest on creating ways for me to make them without having the knowledge of really detailed structures. But I'm starting to do more with Claude. I actually really like Claude, but again, as you know, each one of these AI models has different skill set. It's like having different team members. And I think that's the curse because I really like Claude for writing and reasoning. I like Google for other things. And I like ChatGPT for coding and other things. And so you got to find the one that you like. If you only have one, if I only had one choice, I'd probably go ChatGPT because it's more global. But I mean, that's just me.
I think you're highlighting that there's so many layers of skill actually to using these AI tools. And although I'm fairly comfortable, for example, with how I'm using them at this point and how I've been using them the last couple of years, there's still clearly more levels. Like I haven't done any of the building an agent, so I'm learning a lot from this conversation, and it is opening up a whole new avenue of development. Hopefully that is not overwhelming for practitioners. I think it's just going to be the same as, how we develop our skills in Microsoft Excel and the various levels that you have there in terms of learning about pivot tables, learning about macros. It's just this variety of depth that we can go into in a particular tool.
Oh, I 100% agree. So I actually look at it the same way. I would actually add another layer into it. So I would say that we could go to Power Query and then Power BI on top of that.
Yes. Yeah.
I think that's really the challenge. And the question then becomes like, well, where do I start? Because it can get super overwhelming. And the first thing I suggest is go to, like, for example, Google has some wonderful free courses that you can take on just basic prompt engineering or just learning what an LLM is. And Anthropic has some wonderful free ones as well in Anthropic Academy. And the nice thing about these is some of them have certificates of completion, which is you're building your toolbox of professionalism. And just start learning about what these tools do. I think once you understand that they're not scary and that you can play with them, like, for example, I was trying to show my wife, we recently went to Germany for an international conference of strength training. So she's gluten intolerant and lactose intolerant. And she was kind of freaking out. What are we going to do? We're going to be in Germany. And so I created a prompt. I said, okay, you are a travel agent. My wife and I are going to Germany, Freiburg, and we're going to fly into Frankfurt. How do we get from Frankfurt to Freiburg? We enjoy hiking. We enjoy museums. We need to find restaurants with these constraints. And off it went. And it created a whole kind of, we'll take this train. You go to this train stop. Your hotel is here because I told it what hotel we were at. Well, there's these restaurants nearby that here's some vegan ones, the gluten-free ones. Some of it is you have to realize you will have some problems because AI is not most current. It's from a couple of years ago's data sets. So like she really got excited because there was supposedly a gluten-free waffle shop, which went out of business. So she was a little disappointed. But the story I guess I'm relaying is that we were able to use, and I was showing her how we could use it to kind of plan a trip. Yeah. But we had to be creative with that, that structure that we talked about before, which is, task, context, reference, evaluate, iterate. So we play with it a little bit until we got it back into alignment. And so I think in sports science, it's the same thing. If I'm going to do data analysis, I've got to frame it as you're a data analyst working in sports science. And that kind of makes it reduces the hallucinations, because I think we all know that AI can hallucinate. Basically, hallucination is, the way I look at it is the AI is just confused because you haven't given it enough constraints. And so if I can make it more constrained and I give it really precise, good information, it's going to reduce hallucinations. I don't think you'll ever remove them, but I think you can make them more controlled or less frequent.
Yeah, if I get a bad answer, I think it's on me. It's not on the AI. It means I haven't crafted that prompt in a suitable enough manner. I haven't given it clear enough instructions. So that's a great example. And yes, I use it a lot as well with travel, and give me a walking tour around this city, give me the history. Really useful for that. Bringing it back to sport though, let's fast forward maybe 5 or 10 years. So what does that look like for you in relation to AI in high performance sports settings?
So for me, I know it's already happening, but I think it's going to become more prevalent. So I think one of the first places AI is probably going to be probably leveraged the most is in monitoring. And you know, a lot of people do performance analysis. The old school way was with, like sports code, where you're basically it's post-it notes and you're taking notes. I think we're going to get to a point where AI is doing all that. I know in the NFL, I know Amazon did a thing when they had some NFL games where it was predicting what linebacker is going to, blitz and what's not based on the formation and the team's history and stuff. I think that is only going to become more robust and more developed, because I do believe a lot of teams are starting to invest in that. And the beauty of AI, I think, is going to be, and is at the moment, it can process and handle a lot of data quickly. And we all have worked in high performance where we know that teams collect buckets of data and do very little with it because they can't process it fast enough, in a timely way to actually action it. So for me, I think that's going to be really ground zero where things are going to be really accelerating, because not to dictate what the coaches do, but to inform their decision-making process. I think that's a really important caveat, because I think if you get lazy and then why do they need you as a sports scientist or the strength coach? But your expertise is like, we all know there's certain athletes that they're monitoring metrics where, they shouldn't be able to play. It's off, but for them, that's just normal.
Yeah.
That's just the way they are. And so I think the combination of video analysis, monitoring can be handled much more quickly. So I think that's step one. I think step two is this is then going to start informing training decisions, almost like precision medicine. So I was part of a digital twin program kind of thinking group for the Australian Institute of Sport. And so once we get these kind of structures, then we can start saying, all right, if I change this, what's going to happen to the athlete? Like, for example, athlete A gets 1 extra hour of sleep. What's that going to do for their recovery? Or then you could start using AI to kind of personalize and tailor training to bigger groups of athletes. I use college football, or that, and I will use the NFL, 54 players. How does any strength coach optimize all 54, or sports scientist handle all 54? It's really difficult, because you don't have an army of sports scientists behind the scenes doing stuff. And this is where AI could basically extend the capacity of sports scientists or coaches to do more personalized kind of structures. So I think for me, that's where I see it going. I know our research group, my team, we're trying to get to precision strength and conditioning. That's another reason I've gotten into AI, because I know a lot of people know I've been playing a lot in the velocity space, because I'm trying to find better ways to monitor strength training, because I'm trying to get to the point where we can have more personalized strength.
They've written down extend the capacity of the sports science, extend the capacity of the strength and conditioning coach, because I think that really nicely summarizes how we will use it, how we should use it. It is not replacing our decision making. It is not determining the interventions, but just as you said, it is helping us to deal with the vast amounts of information that is beyond our processing capacity, to then help us with then the intervention. And one of the things I'm always talking about in monitoring is what's the so what? So what do all these numbers mean? So what does the coach need to do about it? So what's your recommendation in terms of the S&C program, the rehab program, the training load? And that will still require the practitioner. That will still require the foundational knowledge. Like we spoke about, you mentioned earlier, the students and young practitioners still need to develop that so that they can interpret it, but it's going to help us with that processing power.
Yeah, I think another way to think of it is personalization at scale. Because if you think about it, right, that's what we're trying to do. I mean, I think any one of us could basically, as a sports scientist, and I've done this, and I'm sure you have as well, work with one athlete and you could give them everything because you have one athlete, and it's so easy. When you start to work in team sports, or another place where I see this is going to probably be big is in defense, tactical spaces, because they need more fluid programming. They need more fluid structures, and it's a different construct. And so monitoring, there's a lot of work going on in monitoring within in the defense space as well. So I think that's going to be a big part of it. I think something you said that really resonated with me is I think we still need the human expert. It's not like we're being replaced. And I think a lot of times when people start to talk about AI, I know for me, when I first started delving into this, I started getting scared. I'm like, well, they're not going to need me as a professor anymore. They're not going to need me as a coach. And as I've gotten into it more, I've come to the conclusion that that's really a false thinking process. That's my own fears about the technology. And I reflected, because I'm old enough to remember when there was no internet in education. So I went through the internet, and I remember in the 90s, people were like, oh, internet's going to kill higher education. It's going to kill higher education. And now we have online courses and everything is reliant on the internet, and it's a big part of what we do. And I feel that AI is going to be the same way, but I think AI is so great at potentially changing how we do things that there are just going to be new jobs. I think there's going to be an AI performance strategist role where someone is using AI to work with the performance team to kind of really use AI in a really positive way. You might see people that are data curators, that their job is to get all the data organized and all that stuff. And then I actually think we'll probably need an AI ethics officer who is there for ethical constraints. I think, but the AI performance strategist, I think, may be the future of where sports science goes in some ways.
There's some really clear examples of new avenues, new roles and responsibilities that can come up in this world or in our sports world, but through the use of AI. So the quality of the outputs, like we say, is always determined by the quality of the inputs. And that's both the data that is being fed in. And as always in sports science fields, we are the data stewards, and we are responsible for the quality of data going in. But I think what you've highlighted today in this discussion is that the quality of the prompts as well is another dimension. And that is actually an important skill set for practitioners going forward. I know you've mentioned then a couple of resources, a couple of courses. Someone watching this right now who's no knowledge in this field wants to get started with developing prompt engineering, where would you direct them?
Well, the first thing I'd do is try one of the AI models. Just find one, play with it. But to get knowledge, the two courses that I really like, I took the one by Google, which was through Coursera. It was a Google prompting course. And I found that was a game changer. I had one of my doctoral students do it, master's students do it, excuse me. And because he was very anti, like we'd have big arguments about AI. He's like, no, bad. I was like, just take this. And he took it, and now he's like, okay, he's actually using it, the skills that he learned in prompt engineering, to schedule his research subject in Google on the calendar. So he's making so I need these days, when do I need it? And it's doing it. And he's really now embraced it a little bit. So I really like the Google one, and their free materials are I sent you some of them. And they're really, really useful. I also like Anthropic's Learning Academy because they're free. And you can just jump in there, and they have a really nice curriculum. I like the two courses from Google and Anthropic because they have a high production quality, because obviously these are very financially stable companies that are really trying to push the boundaries. Because some of the academic ones have a real academic feel. Like I took a few on Coursera from some noted universities, and it was like some professor in front of the screen talking about things. But the stuff with like, for example, Google, Coursera, Anthropic, they are much higher production quality. And when you go through Coursera, they actually have an AI that helps you learn the AI. So they actually have an agent that you can ask questions to, like, quiz me, and it'll quiz you. And you can learn, and then you get a nice certificate that you can put up on your LinkedIn. So I think that's the first place, is find an AI that you're comfortable with. Most people gravitate to ChatGPT, but I wouldn't. I started there, but then I started to play with Gemini, when I used the Google prompting strategies, Gemini got a lot better. It was a lot better than I thought it was, which I thought was interesting. And then I had stumbled into Anthropic because it's actually been around. It's a spin-off of ChatGPT. So there's a wonderful book called Empire of AI that I read, which is about how AI is growing and it's going. The people that are running Anthropic used to be part of ChatGPT, and they had an ethical disagreement about how AI was being developed. So they're two competitive groups. And I found that Anthropic was really, really good for writing and giving, that kind of more, those kind of things. And ChatGPT was more coding, but now they're both equal, which is really interesting. Claude, which is the Anthropic one, now can make PDFs and it can make Word files and it can look at Excel files and it can look at, and it does it really well. I was playing with that this afternoon. So I like those two, but one I think is really good, and I learned it from you actually, was the Google Notebook, the Google NLM. I love the Google NLM. I have been using that a lot with curating information. For example, I can take my lecture notes and I can make a file there, and I can make a mini podcast for my students about a topic in my lecture notes that's not me talking, or I can make an animation, or I can make questions, so I really like that one. And I find that one works really well, especially when you have the full Gemini package. It actually is even more powerful, I think. So I think those three are really good tools. So Google Gemini and the NLM, which is free if you wanted to use it. Claude, which is from Anthropic, and then ChatGPT. I think all three have benefit. If I was not able to afford all three, I would be torn, because if I was at a place where I worked in Google Workspace, I'd probably go Gemini because it's all integrated. If I tend to use Microsoft stuff, so I tend to use ChatGPT. At ECU, we're supposed to use Copilot, but I haven't had the greatest experiences with Copilot. But maybe that's because I haven't done the Microsoft prompting courses, because Microsoft has some for free as well. And it seems that the prompting courses, the strategies, while they're universal, there's little tricks that relate to the one that you're going to use, if that makes any sense. So I would align the courses that I take with the AI I'm going to use, but I think the skills transfer between the two. I mean, and for me, I really like reading, so I tend to read a lot of books. I really liked, the Khan Academy. The guy that started Khan Academy wrote a book on AI and learning. And the way he framed AI for education was around it as a tutor for kids. And so his whole book was how this idea that AI would help people learn, and it would make people of diverse backgrounds have more opportunity, almost like democratization of knowledge. And that was really insightful. So if you don't want to dive into things too deep, the free courses will get you to the prompt engineering. And there's a lot of research being done as well. So some of the courses actually link to publication.
Amazing. And I think obviously all of this is moving very fast. So if someone's watching this a year or two down the line, there's going to be new things. But ultimately, just jump into one, try it. I think it's a great tip to align the course with whichever team you pick, whichever tool you pick. And as you say, there's not necessarily a right or wrong one. They're just slightly different. I will do my best to collate all the resources that have been mentioned in our conversation, and I'll put a link below to a blog post that goes with this, and it will have all the links to all those resources, and particular those three important ones you mentioned there.
I do think that's really important. But one of the things I tell my students with jumping in, spend 20 minutes a week just playing with AI. Just go play with it. Don't be afraid. You're not going to break it. It's not going to break, but be smart. Don't put your athlete's data in there. Don't put things that are copyrighted in there. One of the things that I think people have to be really careful of is not putting a published paper from a peer-reviewed journal that's copyrighted into an AI. If it's open access, fair game. But you have to be smart about what you do. And just always work from the framework that AI is amplifying your abilities, not replacing your abilities. And I think that's a really good way to think about it. But just starting, like I started, I think maybe about 9 months ago, where I think I emailed you, asked a few questions, you showed me a slide, then I read a book. And then from that time, the knowledge that I've gained has been incremental, which I'm finding quite enjoyable, but also the technology is so rapid. I mean, look at Gemini's banana graphics program. If you haven't played with that, play with it. I was able to make, my wife and I have 3 cats. I actually made a picture of one of my cats riding a bicycle and it looks exactly like my cat. But you can create almost anything. So, I mean, the technologies they're actually in an arms race. And I think that can be overwhelming, but the prompt engineering skills, I think, are transcending because that's the foundational skill that you need at every level. So if you can get some basic skills, and I tell my students, if you're more comfortable planning a vacation, plan a vacation. If you're more comfortable planning how to go out for a restaurant dinner, start there and learn to do it and then translate it to sport. Because it's just changing the context.
Yeah, that's some brilliant tips there to, I guess, wrap up in terms of getting started. And I was going to ask kind of what would be your final message, although you just said there about it. Remember that it's going to amplify, not replace your knowledge and your skill set. So I'm going to guess that's kind of that would be your overarching message.
I think my overarching message is don't be afraid of it. Think of it as any other new skill. I've been doing strength and conditioning now for a very long time in sports science. And I have really gotten to a place professionally where I think of everything I do as a toolbox. I have many tools in my toolbox. I know people often like, oh, Dr. Haff only likes weightlifting. No, that's not true. Weightlifting is a tool. If I have an injured athlete, I have to do other things. So what I'm trying to suggest is that AI is another tool for that toolbox that may be a tool that can make me better at the other things I'm trying to do because it may free time for me to do that. But I also think it's one of those things that because of, as you highlighted, the rate of change, we have to be lifelong learners. We have to continue to evolve. And as new things come out, we have to be able to adapt to that. But we also have to be critical and skeptical of the things we're learning. And I think AI is really a place where you must be critical, you must be skeptical of the outputs it gives you, because if you take it at face value, you'll get to that groupthink, you'll get to that point where everybody thinks the same. And I think that can be really problematic because we know in sport, innovation is, I mean, I know you worked in the NFL and there's people in the NFL that are innovators that come up with offensive and defensive structures that no one's ever thought of. And it changes the game. And I know that's, for football, the European football, ice hockey, all sports like that have those kind of innovators. And you don't want AI to just drive everybody in the same direction. You want it to help you have more time to think creatively and use it creatively. So I think it's a tool. Don't be afraid of it. It's going to amplify your abilities if you are dedicated in putting some time into it, like anything else that we do, I think.
Yeah. Yeah. And your point there around be critical and be skeptical, obviously those are key tenets in science. And we have to come back to the fact that we are all scientists here. And so we have to view AI through that scientific lens as well, of being critical thinking and skepticism. So I think there's so much information here. I've certainly learned a lot, even though I've been using AI a couple of years. As I said, we will collate the resources that have been mentioned and put them on my blog, and we'll link below to that. So, but Greg, thank you very, very much for sharing your experiences in AI that you share with your students, share with everyone watching. So it's been really, really valuable and I really appreciate it.
Oh, it's always a joy to talk to you, Joe. when I met you at the NSCA sports science meeting, I knew you and I would get along because we shared a lot of interests, and I love talking to you about these things. And hopefully in the future, there's more things we can talk.
I agree. Absolutely. Thank you.